Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into the GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here at the GSMC Podcast Network. It is your host, Brice Lewis, back at it again to talk about all things basketball related around the basketball world, college, and professional. You know what we do here. We have another jam-packed show for you today. A lot of more Harden news, Harden rumors, as the rumor mill is starting to heat up even more now for James Harden, as we have a bunch of news on teams dropping out, teams coming in, third teams being involved, all of that today on the podcast. Plus, we're going to talk about opening day right around the corner, opening up with Lakers-Clippers on Tuesday. Very exciting time. We're going to talk about my thoughts on that game, plus just just the opening of the NBA season this week. We're going to talk about that today on the podcast as well. We're also going to get into a lot of people got paid because a lot of guys who maybe, were restricted free agents, going to be restricted free agents going into it and everything of that sort, they got paid, but some guys didn't get paid. So we're going to discuss all that and hear and more. Also, we're going to talk about Utah Jazz giving an extension to Rudy Gobert. My thoughts on that extension moving forward. So that's the show we have for you today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of this show. Definitely appreciate it. If you like us, don't forget to subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast on, as we're available on any platform available in the podcasting world. So let's go ahead and jump right into it NBA is back for another season, starting by the day this podcast drops, Tuesday. We have Lakers and Clippers opening up our opening day slate. Very excited. Battle of LA. What a better way to open it up. New look Lakers, new look Clippers. Both teams, same star players, but just a lot of new looks. But before that game also, because that's the game a lot of people talk about, we're also got to talk about the return of Kevin Durant to Golden State as he returns to, Golden State's coming to Brooklyn. So it's just his first game against his former team. And so it's just very exciting. I'm going to talk about the games. Golden State, obviously is a team where they won't have Draymond Green. It's been already said that Draymond Green will not play opening day. But James Wiseman was hurt. That's why he didn't play in the preseason, but he will be ready for opening night. So it'll be great to see the second overall draft pick in this year's NBA draft go out there and play for the first time. We got Steph Curry returning to the floor. Andrew Wiggins, is going to be out there. Kelly Oubre. I mean, this Warriors team still has some talent. So I don't look at this game as, wow, Brooklyn should dominate. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen, really. It's opening day in Brooklyn. Obviously we don't have fans, so it won't feel electric by any sense of the imagination, but it's just going to be refreshing to watch basketball again, to see Kevin Durant play, see Steph Curry play. Hopefully wish those guys to good health this year through a condensed 72-game schedule. And, we really hope for the best here. In the game itself, I think this is a game where we'll really have an idea where Kevin Durant is. Because, he's going to be playing real minutes. He's going to be playing probably 30-plus, as you would expect. Like I said, Kevin Durant's in a situation where a lot of superstars, especially who played in the bubble, may take more time, may not play as many minutes at the start. KD hasn't played in a while, so they're probably going to play him. Obviously, monitor his fitness, make sure he's still good to go. He's not, puffing and puffing. But at the same time, try to get as many minutes out of him for the next couple of weeks to see where he is, to get himself back into full basketball shape so he can be old Kevin Durant again. So I expect Kevin Durant to play 30-plus. I expect Kyrie Irving to have a good game. He played very well during the preseason, so I expect him to have a good game as well. And like I said, this Brooklyn team is very deep. Spencer Dinwiddie, Chris LeVert, Jared Allen, DeAndre Jordan, Joe Harris. They have a lot of talent outside of those guys. This is why Brooklyn is considered a championship contender in the Eastern Conference this year. And I expect them to pick up the victory tomorrow against Golden State. I think Golden State's going to put up a good fight, though. I think Steph Curry, it'll be interesting to see that matchup against Kyrie. I think Steph, if he could play like old Steph, we may see Steph Curry, light it up opening night. I would not be surprised if Steph Curry drops 30-plus, 40-plus in the first game to me. He has a good matchup against Kyrie Irving. Because Kyrie Irving's not the greatest defender in the world. So, Steph can have his, and then Steph and Kyrie are around the same height. So this is one of the few matchups in the league that Steph can kind of just say, well, he's not bigger than me, so I can pretty much just go at him straight up. And so I expect him to have a good day. It'll be interesting to see James Wiseman against DeAndre Jordan and Jared Allen. His first action against a veteran like DeAndre Jordan, we know is a rim protector, one of the leaders of that locker room. And then also seeing, Jared Allen, a younger guy, a little bit more athletic guy, going against James Wiseman, who, a lot of people think he could be a star center in this league. So it'll be very interesting to see what would happen in that regard. But I think, Brooklyn's going to pick up the win. And then we're going to the Clippers and Lakers. This is a game where they played twice in the preseason. I think it was split 1-1, I believe. And, listen, the Lakers are a very deep team. They just gave Kyle Kuzma an extension. So it looks like they have their squad. And I've said this multiple times on the podcast. I think the moves they're making, extending Kuzma, getting Schroeder, some of the guys they picked up look like potential long-term moves of corner pieces for the Lakers for years to come. And so I think this team, I think the Lakers are going to pick up the win actually on opening day here. I think it may be a reverse of last year where, the Clippers dominated the Lakers early, or didn't dominate, but they won early, but then the Lakers won late because the Lakers really got themselves, got the right guys they wanted, got the chemistry down, where Clippers' chemistry was obviously a huge issue for them. This time around, I think, right now, the Clippers are kind of the team that needs to work on chemistry just because, not because the guys haven't played together. I mean, they have to fit in the new guys, but just, with all the dissension in the locker room last year, Ty Lue running the show, how is it going to look in this game? I think they're going to have to get it down. I think right now the Lakers are obviously the more, better chemistry, more together. They know what they are. They can play multiple ways. And so I think at first they're going to have the advantage on the Clippers in this opening day game. And I think LeBron and AD, it'll be interesting to see how many minutes LeBron plays. I think AD is going to probably play what you would expect AD to play. LeBron's going to be interesting because, again, he is older. He's doing a condensed schedule. I'm sure Frank Vogel does not want to put too many minutes on him early. They may want to just okay, we're going to play maybe 30 minutes, 32 minutes, and see how that goes. Very much because, LeBron always had his rotations where he'll have his breaks. Maybe the breaks may be a little longer in these games. Just, if the team's still playing well, okay, we can give him a little bit more time. Things of that sort. So, we'll have to see how it all works out. But I think the Lakers are going to be able to win on opening day and defeat the Los Angeles Clippers. But now to the entire opening day week, I'm just really excited just to see basketball. I'm excited to see the sport that we love. That's why we're here talking about it here at the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We love basketball. We love the sport. We love what it brings to the table. We love how it brings us together. And, hopefully, by playoff times, potentially there may be fans, but I think that, we're in a good spot. I think it's just good to see everybody healthy, see everybody playing, and to see how the season shapes. Because injuries could be a concern. Remember, that was a concern with a lot of medical people with this NBA season being condensed and them returning from playing basketball so soon. Could injuries become a big issue down the stretch? It'll be interesting to see how teams manage that. Depth is going to be huge this year. That's why I said this preseason was very important. Even if you had 3 or 4 or 5 games, it's extremely important to just know, can I trust my 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th guy? If we need to give a guy a game off or longer breaks or extended breaks, can I trust them? That's why I think the preseason was huge for them. And so I think in that situation, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a lot of teams that really try to gear up on the back end, who feels like we can go 1 lineup, 2 lineup. It even go into the 3rd lineup or that third at the end of the bench if we need to. So I think that all of that contributes to the success of the season. Obviously, we hope the COVID won't be too big of a deal. This isn't a bubble, Players are going to have their freedom. So, NBA's already said, COVID cases are going to shut down the league. They've already said that we're not going to be, okay, one COVID case, we're done. You know what I'm saying? Because, like I said, NBA is really the only sport that it's never, they've had COVID cases, but it's been in downtime. It's never been during the season a lot, outside of what happened at the end of this normal regular season last year. So, for me, I think, we hope COVID doesn't affect the season, because we have to think, if a team gets 3 players, would they cancel the game? Would they postpone the game? When you're in a condensed season, you really don't have much movement to move the game, to me. Would you potentially make a team have to play a triple back-to-back? These are questions that the NBA would have to answer. Or are they going to be like, hey, we may not all have an equal 72 games at the end of the year? I mean, the NBA is planning right now to go through a 72-game schedule. Everybody plays 72 games, but we'll have to see if COVID could even potentially stop that. So, we'll have to see, what happens. And, I'm excited to see the rookies. I'm excited to see this draft class, because so many people, I don't like it when people say, oh, this is the worst draft class in years. But yeah, I'm hearing in the preseason all these rookies playing well. Now, yeah, we can sit here and say it's the preseason, don't matter. You know what I'm saying? They need to give those guys those minutes because they didn't have, the summer league and everything of that sort. But I'm excited to see the rookies, because I'm excited for them to play well and show a lot of the scout evaluators that this draft class that I'm a part of, I'm not the wink league. I'm not one of those weak players you think listen in this draft. I'm a guy who could be a mainstay, potentially a star in the league, because, listen, I want to, there's been some drafts that people say, oh, it hasn't been the best, and then we've actually had some good players come out of that draft. Very solid NBA players come out of that draft. So that's why I don't like this impression, oh, it's not a great draft, it's not a deep draft. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like the deepest drafts disappoint the most, because I'm like, what does that mean by a deep draft? Are you saying that we're going to have more stars in this draft? Are you telling me we're going to have more, NBA players that make it on rosters for 10, 12 years in this draft? Are you telling me, there's more superstars? Are you telling me, what does it mean by it's a deeper draft class to me? And then what do you mean by a worse? Are you saying that most of these players really aren't NBA ready, probably won't be in the league 4 years from now, and will be playing in different leagues? Is that what you're telling me this draft class is? I need to know what a week's draft class is. So I'm excited to see these rookies, come out here and show these scouts, hey, I'm not what you thought I was. You think I'm part of the weakest draft class? I'm not the wink link. Now, clearly the team liked you because they drafted you, but those other teams or other people who said, oh, they're not that good, they want to sit there and say, okay, I'm going to show you I'm not a part of that. And I think that's a bit, because I think sometimes a lot of people in this draft that came out, especially in the later end, were seniors and juniors from smaller colleges. So these are guys who have developed their game and now are coming into the NBA more polished than a 1-year, 2-year kid who, talent-wise, may be above them, but they're not as polished. And so they're still trying to develop their game and work on their game, where those seniors and juniors have a more polished game. And then based off the potential talent they maybe could have, can maybe go further. Maybe who your scorers are, your defenders are, et cetera, et cetera. So very excited to see the draft class. I'm just excited to see this entire season play out. I'm excited to see how it goes. I'm excited to see the end of the year tournament for the 8th spots again. I'm excited for all of it. So, I'm definitely going to be on my post watching basketball as much as I can this year, to help give you guys my analysis on everything I see throughout the year. Any big news we will cover here on this podcast, and it's going to be a great time doing it. So there you go right there. That's my outlook on the NBA season, and hopefully we're going to be in for another doozy this year. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into some James Harden news and rumors right here on the podcast, plus other NBA news and rumors. So stay tuned.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we discussed the opening day games for the NBA, Lakers and Clippers, and Nets and Warriors, and gave my predictions. I also just talked about my outlook on the season, what I'm excited to see, what I'm excited to watch this year during this 72 game stretch, condensed 72 game stretch, a lot of basketball in just a few months. It's going to be exciting, man. It's going to be exciting to watch it all unfold. Hopefully COVID doesn't become too big of a deal. Obviously, with the vaccine out, it definitely opens up the possibility for fans, at least by playoff time. So we'll see if they can maybe get to that point. But we're going to have to see how everything works out. So, but here's the thing. We're going to go ahead and get into the news. We have more James Harden news. So apparently, from reports, two teams that are becoming favorites within the James Harden trade are two teams we haven't even talked about. I mean, we talked about one team very briefly, but the other team we never even talked about. And they've made a big deal for a superstar just a couple years ago that got them a championship. The Toronto Raptors and the Boston Celtics are apparently two teams that are talking and engaging with Houston potentially to get James Harden. Now, if I talk about both, I feel like Boston, my question with Boston, if they made that trade for James Harden, is what are you giving up? Are you giving up a Kemba Walker and a Jaylen Brown for a James Harden? Are you comfortable knowing that basically it's all maybe a Marcus Smart, what do you want to say? Maybe a Marcus Smart, not even a Kemba, like a Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, maybe another guy and some picks. Is that something you're comfortable with for James? And then maybe if you're able to keep Kemba, I think you're still in good shape because you still got Harden, you got Tatum, and you got Kemba who can all score the ball. But I feel like Boston, one of their biggest weaknesses still to me this year as a team is that I don't know if they have enough depth on that bench to give them enough support. And I don't think, letting the guys you have go now, unless you think Harden's going to make up for both of them, it's a risky move if I'm Boston. So I was surprised to see that they were even considered potential favorites. But you never know. Danny Ainge is a guy, you know him. He likes rolling the dice. He's not afraid to make that big move if he has to. Remember, before he got Tatum in them, he was wheeling and dealing for all kinds of players. He was kind of Daryl Morey East. He was making big moves. He was making changes to the team if he could. So I'm not surprised, though, that he's in it, because he sees, like, if we compare Jason Tatum and James Harden together, I feel like we would have one of the best 1-2 punches in the entire Eastern Conference, and that could be good enough to rival a KD Kyrie. So, and maybe y'all have to look at us as the favorites. And then if you're looking at it from Toronto's perspective, Toronto, they were able to make a big deal. They were able to give off DeRozan some picks. They won a championship because they had a very good team around them. Now, this team, again, what are you giving up exactly? What are you giving up? A Siakam? Are you giving up a Kyle Lowry? I don't know if they give up Van Fleet just because you sign them to that deal and then say, okay, now you're going to go somewhere else. I don't know, but what are they giving up? Are they giving up I'm guessing a guy like an OG Anunoby would be in that type of trade. You might throw an extra player in there like Patrick McCall. He doesn't play, but he's Patrick McCall. He has 3 rings. I mean, he played with Golden State for 2 years and 1 in Toronto, so he 3-peated. So, and some picks. Toronto, Masai Ujiri has shown clearly with Kawhi Leonard trade, he's willing to make a move like this. The only difference is I think when they got Kawhi, they already had an all-around team. They just needed a superstar. Where now I think this team's not in that same position. They don't have, remember, they had Lowry, Siakam developing, OG Anunoby developing, Ibaka, Gasol, They had Van Fleet. Like, they had multiple guys, and then you just added Kawhi, because basically all they did was flip DeMar DeRozan and Kawhi and some other things. This time with James Harden, there's going to be a much bigger, give that you have to give them. And so the biggest thing with Harden to me has always been this. Are you willing to give up a part of your team for him? It usually with superstars you would say yes, but are you confident when the trade deadline hits and people get cut that you can fill out your team and still have a competitive roster? That's going to be the key to me. If you're going to be able to have a competitive roster. And so that's going to be the interesting with these two teams. Now, a team that isn't in the running anymore for James is the Miami Heat. Apparently, the Miami Heat in the Rockets could not find common ground on draft compensation. And Pat Riley basically just said, you know what? I'm fine sticking with my people. We're going to go into the season. We're going to see how it goes. We're going to go from there. Because I think one thing that's holding up this trade with James Harden for the Rockets, I don't even think is the players. I think it's the picks. Because a lot of the teams that he's interested in, or teams that they've engaged with, have already made big deals in the past that gave up a lot of picks. Remember, Toronto gave up a lot of picks for Kawhi Leonard. They gave up a lot of picks. Miami, they've made some trades where they've given up picks here and there over time, so that's why they don't really have the same draft compensation. There's another team on the top of my head that also gave up a lot of picks. Oh yeah, Brooklyn. They gave up a lot of picks before. So, I mean, it's not like these teams have a bunch of load of picks. Some guys don't want to give up the rest of their 2020 picks for James Harden. And remember, Houston's asking for 4 first-round picks. So if you don't got multiple picks in 1 year, you're giving up your next 4 years of first-round picks for him. And so I think that's the big thing here. And that's going to be the big thing moving forward. And so Miami just said, "Hey, we're good. We're going to stick with our team. We're going to stick with our squad, and we're satisfied with it. And we're going to see what happens." So I understand them not maybe willing to shell the boat out to get him, because he felt like he had to do what he had to do. And I think that's going to be interesting moving forward. And so on and so forth. So, listen, we're going to have to see. But it definitely sounds like James Harden rumors are heating up. It seems like that clearly he's getting some teams to be like, all right, we need to make a move on this guy. And there's even people who are saying that he may be moved before the season even starts. That's how some people are getting confident that could happen. So it's going to be interesting moving forward. And so we're going to have to see. And so on. So we'll see. But kind of want to talk about some guys getting paid and not getting paid. And I'm actually going to talk about some guys who are not getting paid. A lot of deals were made because a lot of teams with guys who are restricted free agents coming up had to come up with deals before the deadline on Monday. And some players were able to get a new deal done. Some guys are going to be with their teams for years to come. They got picked some big money, some good money, so they're going to be there. And you got some guys who weren't. And I'm going to talk about a couple of guys right now who weren't paid, and then we're going to talk about some guys who were paid. So, first, we got to talk about Lauri Markkanen. Lauri Markkanen, if you remember Lauri Markkanen, finished third Rookie of the Year voting his rookie year. Stretch for a guy who seemed like, Chicago got a little star on their hands here. Has been dealing with injury issues the last 2 years, plus some coaching issues. Hasn't really been the same Lauri Markkanen. Now he's in his 4th year. So the Bulls and them were far apart coming in reports. They were far apart on an actual deal done. So now he's going into the season playing it out till next summer. Cannot re-up a deal till next summer. And it'll be interesting to see. Lauri Markkanen has a lot of potential. Still a very young player. Stretch for, he can score the ball. A guy who definitely, if he has a good year this year and stays healthy, will command a lot of money. Probably a guy who will get close to a max deal potentially. And so it'll be interesting to see, it's always interesting in these situations because basically players in these situations, they're trying to, play well this year to maximize profit. And so I feel like the teams that they play for, when they potentially allow them to not, or they don't pay them, it makes me wonder, what do you root for the player to be great if you know you're not going to, like I think some people feel like this, and this is the same situation with John Collins in Atlanta. If you're not going to pay them, and you know you're not going to pay them, then why not just trade them? Why would you know you're not going to pay? Like, unless you really are sitting here and debating, unless it's a real serious discussion that you're having, like, do we want to pay him? Like, it's just like, we're not sure. That's why we haven't paid him, but we're still trying to get to that point if we want to go ahead and pay him. Then I understand. But I feel like some teams, won't pay them. So then it's just like, well, why don't you move off of them? Because it's not like these teams are championship teams. You never hear a championship team with an elite restricted free agent or a really good restricted free agent. So to me, I would be like, well, why would you keep them? And to me, if the Bulls and Lauri Markkanen were that far apart on a contract, it makes me feel like, do the Bulls really want to keep you? Now, I understand the Bulls. Lauri Markkanen's situation is different because he has been injured, like I've said. So I can understand the Bulls being hesitant to give him the money he thinks he wants. And they may want him to sit here and say, okay, if you can stay healthy this year, if you can play like you played, play even better, we will heavily consider going ahead and matching whoever offers you. Because usually in NBA free agency, when it comes to restricted free agents, they literally just say, all right, this is what's going to happen. We're usually going to let a team just offer you something, and then we'll decide if we want you or not to match. Because literally what they're offering you is what we could pay you. Literally, plus also, they're the home team, so they could have paid you more. So for them, it's literally just a matter of, do we want you or not? It's the same situation with John Collins in Atlanta. We didn't really know how far apart Atlanta and John Collins were on a deal, but they really weren't on the same page. I mean, I'm an Atlanta Hawks fan. I've seen Atlanta Hawks Twitter. They've been constantly talking about, I hope we sign back John. A lot of people want to sign back John, but we question, does the front office want to sign back John? Because we've heard them say, that they're hesitant to pay him because of his defensive liability. And then you've seen the moves the Atlanta Hawks made. They've gotten a lot of forwards. It's like they're kind of preparing themselves to let go of John. And when you see those moves being made, it kind of makes you think he might not stay there. I mean, I literally saw on the Twitter feed, they said, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if John Collins was traded. And honestly, if I'm Atlanta, I don't see why you wouldn't. He's a young 25-year-old player who averaged 20 and 10. Who's a stretch 4, who is very athletic. You can get you some good compensation back for him. There's no point to let it get to restricted free agency next year and lose him for nothing. Especially if John Collins still balls out this year and is a big part of why Atlanta makes the playoffs. How can you sit here and tell this man to his face, we're not keeping you? So I think that's going to be a very interesting situation in Atlanta as well. And we're going to continue more on this discussion next segment, so stay tuned for that right here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we discussed James Harden rumors, teams in and out of that trade discussion with James Harden, as trade rumors have been heating up. A lot more people have been talking about James Harden could be moved for opening day. I don't think it's going to happen that soon, but it definitely feels like Houston is actually trying a little bit harder to see if they can get the deal they want, which I still have more news on later in the show, so stay tuned for that. I still have more news on the Houston front and what they're doing to try to make sure they can get this trade to happen. But now, I want to continue what I was talking about last segment. And I was, talking about guys who haven't been paid. We're going to get to the guys who have been paid, but we're going to wait on that a little bit. So, like I said, with John Collins, Lauri Markkanen, guys who have played well. Like I said, John Collins missed 25 games last year because of a suspension. Lauri Markkanen's missed because of injuries. But if things work out, you have to understand something. We're in a good position right now to see, a lot of young players in this league, get paid. And I think one question, you always think to yourself, when you make this decision as a GM, as an owner, as a head coach, if you retain a player like this, is that what you're trying. My question with Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, and any young player that you sign, where are you trying to go as a team? Is the first question I would ask. And then, do you think he would be a reason why you could get to that goal? Or do you think that he is a reason why you might not get to that goal? Because, to me, think about it. John Collins, they've said, defensive liability. The Hawks want to be a better defensive team. They're like, we got Dre. He'll average 30 a game. We think Cam Reddish can score. We think Kevin Huerter can score. We think we got enough offense from everybody else. So really, John Collins 20 and 10 isn't necessarily needed. But what we do need is better defense. And John Collins is a weakness in that department. So maybe that's why the Atlanta Hawks are looking at John Collins and saying that's why we don't want to pay him. Because where we want to go, he's not necessarily making that better unless he just improves tremendously as a defensive player. Same thing with Lauri Markkanen. Do we feel like he can stay healthy long term? Do we feel like with the team we're constructing, he will still be ideal in what we're going to do? Do we have anybody else that we feel like could do what he's doing for us? Does he hinder other players on the team? Those are questions that I think are asked by, GMs and head coaches and owners when discussing these types of, situations. And these types of if we're going to sign a guy long term or not. Now, if we talk about some guys who got an extension, Derek White, drafted by the San Antonio Spurs a couple years ago, where if y'all forget, he had that big game 5 a couple of years ago. I forgot who they were playing. I think it might have been a couple of years ago against the Denver Nuggets. He had a big series. He had 30 plus, and they won that game. And that was kind of his coming out show. Last year really was still good, but not maybe where some people thought he could have went. But he just got paid 4 years, $73 million. So clearly the Spurs sat here and said, we look at Derek White, we look at what we have. DeJounte Murray has been in and out of the lineup. Derek White is a point guard. He's been basically our main guy at point for the last year. So we think he could be our starting point guard for the future, potentially. So that's a reason why we would go ahead and give him this money. He's still young. He's still developing. Within our culture and system, we feel like he'll continue to get better. So we feel like what we want, where we want to go is answered yes. And then what we want to be is answered yes. And so I think that's why Derek White got this extension. Because they felt like, hey, he does what we need him to do. We think that he does what we want our team to be in the future well. And so why would we move off of him if we don't have to? That would be my thinking on that. And then OG Anunoby, same thing. 4 year, $72 million extension. OG Anunoby has been a very underrated player for the Raptors. A lot of people don't talk about him. Remember, he was hurt during their finals run. He was hurt. He had an emergency appendectomy, I believe, and missed the entire playoffs. And then he came back in the finals but didn't play. Because he hasn't played the entire playoffs. And then so they're like, we already got our guys. We're going to stick with our guys. But this past year, he had a really good year. He hit that big shot against Boston. OG, he can ball. He can play. He's a really good player. He's a really good 2 guard. And like I said, or 3 really, if you put Siakam at the 4, which I'm sure they're going to put him at the 4 now without Baca and Gasol. So it's going to be Kyle Lowry, Van Fleet, OG Anunoby, Siakam, and then whoever they want to put at the center position. That's still a pretty good starting lineup. And OG Anunoby's a really good young player, athletic. He's improving his shot. A guy who plays good defense. A guy who goes for hustles for loose balls. I mean, I'm sure within that Toronto culture, they probably felt like, especially with losing Ibaka and Gasol, listen, we're having to kind of rebuild ourselves, having to reboot. Okay, what do we want to be? Where is our strength? Our strength is in our guards and our forwards, not in our front court. So let's go ahead and make sure we have that secured. They have their backcourt secured now with OG, Fred, and Kyle. So they pretty much have that. We know what we're going to be. That's why they went ahead, gave him the deal, got him paid. Because they think with his talent and with his potential, he could be a very big and important player in what they want to do long term. And then we can get into also Orlando. Orlando has been giving out Fultz, 3 years, $50 million extension. Had a really good year in Orlando last year. I mean, Orlando's not a lot of national televised games. A lot of people didn't watch it. But remember, 4th overall draft pick, drafted by the Sixers, was injured, shoulder issues, shot issues, never really played in Philadelphia. Didn't work. They traded him away, played very well with the Magic. And Jonathan Isaacs, we've all looked at Jonathan Isaacs from the Magic as that one young player who has that star potential. He got 4 years, $80 million. Clearly, that shows you that Orlando sees the same thing we see. In Orlando, they're a team that is at that point where they're mediocre, but they still have young talent that they like. Jonathan Isaacs is someone I definitely would keep around. And Fultz, if he continues to develop this way, why wouldn't you keep him around? So to me, again, it's like, for me at least, you have young talent, Orlando. Now listen, I think they might move off Vucevic. They might move off Eric Gordon. We've heard Eric Gordon's name in trade rumors for the longest time. Nothing's happened. But we've heard the rumors. We've heard that they're looking at it. So potentially, if you're Orlando, you sign your young pieces. Try to maybe get more of some draft picks in there. Get some other young pieces in there. And try to potentially take that and try to develop your team from there. Try to get your team better from there. And then that way, Orlando might be setting themselves up if Jonathan Isaacs continues to develop, if Markelle Fultz continues to develop, and then whoever else we get in from the trades, we could put maybe a better team around, and then maybe we can potentially be a better team than what we've been. Because that's what every team wants to try to do. Where are we trying to go, and what do we want to be? You know what I'm saying? So I think that's why, again, it's an understandable reason why they made this move. And then we can talk about Lonzo Ball, another guy who didn't get paid today. Now, from the way they reported it, it's almost like he had a contract, he didn't accept it, and said, "I'm just going to play the season now." I'm sure Lonzo is at a point in his career right now where I think Lonzo really just wants to take a look at everything. And he wants to really see to himself, do I really want to play in New Orleans? Is this really the best place for me moving forward? New head coach Stan Van Gundy, will it work? I think Lonzo's taking that wait-and-see approach with his team. He wants to know, is this offense going to fit me? Am I going to be able to have a great year? Because Lonzo may sit here and think, well, hold on a second. I feel like I'm better than what I've played in this league. If I have a career year, I can command more money. Lonzo's taking a bet on himself, which there's nothing wrong with that. Because it does feel like, from a lot of people's perspective, Lonzo Ball hasn't reached the expectations that we all thought he could have reached. He isn't the player that he isn't the player. He hasn't became the player that we thought he could become. And so I think a lot of people were looking at that and thinking, well, I can understand why Lonzo decides not to maybe take the extension they had, because he wants to sit here and say, okay, let me see what happens this year. Because if Lonzo plays well, listen, there's still teams that need point guards in this league. And they may think Lonzo could be that guy. And so somebody may be out here willing to pay Lonzo some big money to be the point guard of their team. You know, and so that may be a move that could potentially be in the works. I mean, I know this is very far-fetched, but hey, you never know. Clippers, if they still need a point guard next year, they might be willing to get to the Lonzo Ball sweepstakes and he can come right back to L.A. And we go what LeVar says, he wants all of them to play in Charlotte. But, you know, that'd be interesting. But I don't think Lonzo would want to go there. But so it'll be interesting to see that he never got a deal done. And it looks like we have some pretty good restricted free agents next year who are going to be on the market. Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, and Lonzo Ball. 3 guys who could be all all-stars in this game, could all be really good players. You may not want to say superstar, but really good players. And so, definitely want to sit here knowing that information, knowing that they can become that, and say to yourself, okay, well, what's going to happen? Hopefully, for all 3 of these players, you hope no suspensions. Everybody has good health. And they ball. That's all you want. I'm all about players getting their money. Get your paper, sir. Because, listen, you got to secure yourself. NBA contracts are all guaranteed. If you feel like, hey, I need to prove myself. Because, listen, I expect John Collins. He's had 20 and 10. If he still gets 20 and 10 with all the new talent in Atlanta, he needs to be paid. Lauri Markkanen, if he stays healthy and balls out, he needs to get paid. If Lonzo finally reaches the expectations that people have thought he could reach, he gets a shot, he starts shooting a good percentage or a decent percentage from 3, and gets about 8-9 assists, he needs to get paid. So, clearly right now, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But also, congratulations to all the guys who got paid, who teams say, we think you are what we need now and for the future, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that you're a part of that. Because that's the type of security that every NBA player wants. And they were able to secure that. So good job for them. And so, like I said, we're going against the open week. Pretty much everybody has their contract secured for the most part. You never know if sessions can still happen during the year potentially, but looks like everything's pretty much cut and dry right now. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get back into some more James Harden rumors. Teams possibly in back on Harden, Ben Simmons as well. And I also want to kick off next segment talking about Rudy Gobert, as he's also signed a big deal. But I kind of want to give my thoughts on that, why I feel a little indifferent about this deal if I'm the Utah Jazz. So stay tuned right here.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Last segment, we discussed players who are getting extensions. My thoughts on those particular players getting extensions. I also continue my discussion on why certain players who weren't getting extensions didn't get it done, why they're going to go into restricted free agency next year, as we have a really good restricted free agency class coming up. But before we get into the last segment, I would like to remind all of you, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_basketball. That is GSMC_basketball, where we can discuss everything about basketball. Definitely love to interact with you guys there, so don't forget to follow us there on GSMC_basketball. Also, whatever platform you're listening to us on, not Twitter, but any platform that you listen to us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Springer, any of that. Don't forget to leave us a review or subscribe. We definitely appreciate it if you do it, because without GSMC, without you guys, there wouldn't be a GSMC. So, I'm going to get into some Rudy Gobert discussion before I get into the final thing I want to talk about with James Harden. Because the Utah Jazz just made Rudy Gobert a very, very rich man. 5 years, $205 million, I believe. And obviously it's great for him. But I think there is a common thought process among people that we kind of don't understand the move. Rudy Gobert is at best a defensive center who can give you some offense. He's not elite offensively in any category. He cannot stretch the floor. He doesn't even have a mid-range shot. He is primarily a back to the basket defensive center. And the Utah Jazz paid him $200 million to do that. And so, to me, I feel like, in my honest opinion, Utah has officially established themselves where they are in the Western Conference. This is what they're going to be. Because I wouldn't pay Rudy Gobert that kind of money for the type of player he is. If you want to give him 4 years, $100 million, that's fine. Legitimately, that's if you want to pay him $25 million a year, 4 years, 100, that's completely fine. Completely fine. You know, because NBA players, we have a lot of money to go around. If you want to pay Rudy Gobert that, fine. But paying him 40 plus a year, I couldn't do that. It couldn't be me. And so for me, I was shocked by this decision. I understand giving Donovan Mitchell the extension because he's like their superstar. He really is the Jazz's like superstar. Rudy Gobert at best is an all-star player. And yet he's getting paid more than Donovan Mitchell. Now, clearly because this is Rudy Gobert's second time go around with contracts, so his money's bigger. But I wouldn't have made that move. I honestly scratched my head when I saw that because I was just like, Utah, you're basically saying that we're going to tie our two money into Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell, and we're just going to hope that we put a good enough team around to win. And I'm not sure, man. Listen, I'm not against Rudy Gobert getting his money, so don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong at all. I'm not against Rudy Gobert getting his money. Never will be against a player getting his money. Never will be against that. What I'm just questioning is Utah's basically saying we're living and dying with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. And I understand living and dying with Donovan Mitchell because Donovan Mitchell, it feels like he has that superstar potential. But Rudy Gobert, there is no superstar potential. He is what he is. You only give $200 million contracts to superstar players. And the fact that you're willing to tie up that much money into him, if Utah always gets eliminated in the first round or never ends up being better than a fourth seed, fifth seed, you have to look at this move and basically say they did this to themselves. You tied up this money in a guy who really, I mean, honestly, you could easily get another Rudy Gobert. Like I'm not trying to make it seem like he is just like he's not meaningful because he is one of the best defensive centers in the league. You need him to go against guys like Joker in them. I'm not saying that, but you could find you another 7-footer who could go against those guys, defend the rim, and get you putbacks. Because that's what Rudy Gobert is. Unless Rudy Gobert comes out with a new offensive game, and now he's now a 20-point game guy, even then, if Rudy Gobert became a 20-point a game center, then we could sit here and make the argument, okay, maybe, you know what, that's fine. At least he improved his game. But if Rudy Gobert is what we're going to be seeing for the last few years, I understand the defensive rookie of the years, all that. Defensive player of the years. But me personally, I wouldn't have made that. I wouldn't have made that deal. I wouldn't have. And remember, he didn't even take the full 220 he could have took. He did it for flat cap flexibility. I'm like, Rudy, I'll give you 5 for 100. Because you're still getting paid. NBA is like you're getting your money, you're still getting $100 million, $200 million. You know how we always talk about Chris Paul's on a bad contract, John Wall's on a bad contract. Trust me, in about a year or two, even probably right now for some people, Utah already got a bad contract, and it's Rudy Gobert. Donovan Mitchell's contract is a good contract because we know what Donovan Mitchell can become. Rudy Gobert, I wouldn't be surprised if people right now are saying, terrible contract. Utah has set themselves back now. So, that's basically the way it is for me. So, I just want to get my thoughts on that situation. Like I said, I'm for Rudy Gobert getting his money. So, I'm not at all against him getting his money. I'm just saying a guy who doesn't really have much of an outside game, like I said, good defensively. That's his specialty. But I just don't see the value in paying him $200 million. That's just me. But now let me get back into some James Harden news and rumors. So, first, I feel like, and basically, Houston is now trying to do a little bit more to get James Harden out there. They have re-engaged with the Brooklyn Nets, and they're discussing a third team getting into it. Because Houston basically reported Houston's realizing they really might have to get a third team in one of these deals to really get Harden's trade demands done. And for them to get what they feel like they deserve back in return. Which I've said on this podcast, they're going to probably need a third team to really get what they want. Because there's just no way a team is willing to give up all their draft picks and young players for James Harden. Another team is going to have to give up. I always said that third team is probably going to give up some draft picks. That's probably their role. They may give up a role player and then some draft picks. That's what that third team's role is going to be. Because there's just not a lot of teams who have the draft capital and the players to sit here and say, I'm going to give you the rest of our draft and a young star player for James Harden. And so a third team was always the most evident, most likely thing because I just didn't see where else it would go. To me. So I think that's the right move to be made here. I think, as it should be, we'll see. I mean, if Brooklyn can pull off this trade without giving up KD or Kyrie, that's going to be huge. It's going to be huge. And now with those three guys, and let's say they're able to keep a LeVert or a Spencer Dinwiddie too, Brooklyn might now become the favorites in the Eastern Conference heavily, and in some circles may become the favorites in the entire NBA. So if Brooklyn can pull this off, Brooklyn could really solidify themselves as a top team. And listen, people are going to talk about, is that too much pressure on Steve Nash, his first year as head coach? I think Steve Nash is ready for it. I think Steve Nash understood the situation coming into it from the get-go. So adding another personality, I don't think it's going to change anything. Plus, I feel like it's different. It's not like James Harden's going to come into Brooklyn and expect Brooklyn to be Houston. Remember, he was the guy in Houston. He was the star. He has KD and Kyrie there. He's not going to be the guy. Honestly, it's KD. KD probably to me is the head honcho, and then James, and then Kyrie. But I don't think anything crazy would happen with that. And I think they would definitely keep him. And then they said, still look out for Philadelphia. They said, and Brian Windhorst went on ESPN and basically said, Daryl Morey says Ben Simmons isn't available, but it's not credible. He is hearing that Ben Simmons is definitely available, and he is open to trading Ben Simmons. Because remember, people said Ben Simmons was going to be the guy who would probably leave with Daryl Morey as GM, because what does Daryl Morey want? Shooters. What does Ben Simmons not do? Shoot. He is not a Daryl Morey player. Daryl Morey would love a guy with Joel Embiid, because Joel can still shoot the three, and then he's dominant in the paint. But Ben, he can't shoot. And so he's looking at, I could go get me a better player who can shoot, and all I got to do is give up Ben Simmons, another guy, and some picks. Now, clearly, again, that may be another situation where a third team has to become involved, and it's like, okay, I'll give you Ben, I'll give you Thibault, I can maybe give you a first round, maybe a second, and then maybe we can get another team to give you the rest of those first round picks you want, and we can make a deal. And that way, now Philadelphia looks like a favorite, because now they have James Harden and Embiid, two of the two elite players at their position. So, to me, it makes me feel like, hey, why not them? Why not them? Because that's how I feel. Why not them? They have all the potential in the world. So, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, definitely some teams to keep an eye on. Definitely some teams to make sure we don't sleep on, because that third team creeps in, they're going to be just much as alive. Philadelphia probably gives them the best trade package, but Brooklyn may be the most aggressive. So we're going to have to see what happens in that entire situation. And then we also have to see with Ben Simmons being available, could that mean he's also available just in general? Could he be available where other teams could still say, hey, is Ben Simmons still available? I might be able to give you a package for him. That's something Daryl Morey, again, a deal maker like him, I'm sure he'll keep his ear open to that possibility if that potential is there. So we're going to have to keep an eye on Ben Simmons this year. But that's all the time we have here on the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for letting me be part of your day. Like I said, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_basketball. Also, don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. This is your host, Brice, signing out saying have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.